Thank you, everybody. I know that I'm the last thing standing between you guys and all those really fun activities, so I will make this short and sweet. And I also don't have my notes, so it'll probably be even a little bit shorter. I'm here to talk about the $1 million gap in your paid search strategy. And so just to kick things off with a little bit of a quiz, what do these industries have in common? You guys don't have to necessarily shout it out, but mortgage, insurance, travel, hospitality, healthcare, telecom, and home services. So just kind of think about what might tie them all together. It's that these are all considered purchase categories, meaning that customers research online, but ultimately convert over the phone. And this makes sense, right? So these are very complex, complicated, expensive categories that people don't buy very often. So just an example, I recently moved to Colorado and I bought a condo. And I was a first-time home buyer, and I had a ton of questions. And when I was first kind of starting out this process, I didn't just Google mortgage rates and then go ahead and purchase the first, go with the first paid search ad I saw. I talked to everybody I could. I did a ton of research online, and a lot of these ultimately ended in phone calls. I wanted to talk to people to learn more, to get my questions answered. And it's not just things like a really big process like a loan. Calls are important in multiple different categories. BIA Kelsey says that in 2018 alone, there'll be 145 billion phone calls to businesses. And these phone calls really matter. So 3-day blinds is a custom window treatment that we're going to talk a little bit down the road, and 70% of their appointments are booked over the phone. And Dish, everybody here knows Dish, 92% of their revenue is driven over the phone. 92%, that's a giant number of conversions that happen over the phone. And so we know that phone calls matter, and you guys are all in paid search, so you might think I'm a little crazy for getting up and talking about phone calls, but everything that you're doing is driving both online conversions and offline conversions. And based off the conversations that we had earlier with that entire panel, it seems like the room is struggling with being able to tie those two things together. And a struggle that I think one person felt like they kind of had a grasp on it, but no one else raised their hand saying that they could confidently tie their online to their offline. And this means that you guys spend a ton of money on all these digital tools to optimize your paid search, but as soon as someone leaves digital and picks up the phone to call in, you're totally blind to what's happening on that call. You don't know what happened on the call, you don't know what drove it, you don't know how to use all that information to optimize your paid search spend. And so this is kind of a little bit of a tee-up slide, but we've only got about 10 minutes, so just try to get to the point. So imagine if you could get that same level of visibility and data that you have for all of your digital channels about phone calls. The great thing is that Invoca can really help you do that. We can help you bridge that online and offline gap with call intelligence. So what this means is that we can track everything from the channel, the campaign, down to the keyword that you guys are spending a lot of money and hard work to drive, tie that to phone calls. Not only attribute those phone calls back to those paid search ads, but take what we have on the call itself, so understanding the conversation, what was said, what product lines are mentioned, which customers are being mentioned, and what ultimately happened of did they convert, and did revenue come from that phone call, and tie that all the way back to your paid search spend. And so how does it work for optimization? So there's a lot of different things you can do with call intelligence, but we're gonna stick with just a basic optimization use case for you guys right now. So the first step is that we're able to tie phone calls back to all the digital campaigns that preceded it. And I'm not going to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of how exactly it works, but I do want to say that as of May 25th, we will be GDPR compliant, and so we have a ton of really useful information that is still going to be usable for you guys a month from now. So that phone call is able to capture all the digital steps that led up to the call itself. And then the phone call can comes through our Invoca platform, and we can understand what's happening on the call. So it could be things that are basic, like did they mention car insurance? Did they mention a competitor of yours? Or it can be a lot more complex, and they can understand what was the actual outcome. So did somebody complete an application? Was it a customer service call? What really happened from that initial keyword to that conversation? And then lastly, we can make it all actionable. So we can take that information and digitize it so you can push it back into the tools that matter most to you. So you can now understand what drove the call, what happened on it, and use it to optimize your paid search spend. And so I'm gonna walk through 3 different use cases about our actual customers of how they have used call intelligence. And I live in Denver, and so I thought it'd be appropriate to use kind of a ski analogy to walk through beginning, intermediate, and expert. Ski season's pretty much over right now, but it was snowing when I left yesterday, so I think I can still use this. And so let's just start off with a beginner use case for using call intelligence. And so 3 Day Blinds is a customer of ours. You guys may or may not have heard of them, but they are a custom window treatment company. They've been around for about 80 years or so they've been around for a while, and their product is very customized and very high touch. So if you want to get custom window treatments, you have to call in, schedule an in-home appointment. They send an expert out to come measure your windows, do all sorts of consultative processes, and then from there you can actually make the purchase. You can't buy anything on their website and just check out. And so they really wanted to understand which of their paid search campaigns were driving these phone calls that led to their in-home appointments. If you remember from the beginning, 70% of their appointments are set up over the phone, not online. And before using Invoca, they really didn't have any way to tie these 2 things together. In fact, when they would run things like direct mail campaigns, they would measure the success based off just anecdotal feedback from their reps who would go into somebody's home and maybe see a direct mail flyer just sitting on a kitchen counter, and they'd hear that and be like, all right, cool, that's a success, like, let's do more of those, which is kind of a funny little story, but it's not a really great way to get ahead in this sort of very competitive environment. And so their solution is pretty fundamental stuff, is that they were able to tie every phone call back to the paid search campaign that drove it. And then they did that through using Invoca and our integration with AdWords and Bing. So every search would have a unique phone number tied to it, and that essentially acts as an identifier. So it's pretty simple stuff to be able to say that this is tied to this campaign, and so when a phone call would come in, they could see in AdWords that call data directly next to that click data. So hugely valuable information, especially when 70% of the conversions were going over their phone and they were totally blind to that before. So the second use case is once you understand what's happening to drive those phone calls, is you want more high quality calls. And Mutual Omaha, probably a brand name that most of you guys have heard of, they're an insurance company. They sell insurance products like Medicare supplement insurance, life insurance, kind of all different financial services things. And they, again, it's a very complex process, and so phone calls are a big part of their entire selling customer journey. And so what they knew was that, yes, phone calls are good. If someone calls in and talks to somebody, they're going to be more likely to ultimately purchase something, to convert over the phone. But the problem was they didn't know what was good call or bad call. They basically just knew that calls are good, so let's just assume that if we spend money to drive a call, that's good enough. And then they kind of realized that that's not good enough. This is a very competitive industry. These calls are very expensive to handle, to manage. They want to drive more of the right calls. And the problem is you can't optimize what you can't measure. And so we partnered with Mutual of Omaha to, again, this is going to be kind of a thread throughout this, is that we were able to stitch together that digital and call data to categorize quality calls and then use that to justify adjusting bid spend. And this was kind of a combination of actual conversation data, so maybe keywords or phrases that are being said, certain policies that are mentioned, call duration. They know that someone couldn't convert in 30 seconds, like you're not gonna be able to do that over the phone in 30 seconds. And then kind of different drop-off points within the call itself. So they were able to say, of these different world of data points, this is a profile of a high quality call. And then they could say, perfect, this is a quality call. What led to it? This keyword. Perfect, let's optimize to spend more money on these calls that are driving high quality calls, and then suppress bid on the ones that just weren't. So not only did they know what was driving calls, they were able to say, yes, this is a call that we care about, let's get more of them. And that's kind of the decision that you were able to see. They were able to say, hey, maybe keyword A drove 145 calls, which seems great, but they realized that 101 of them were the actual quality calls. They were kind of able to say, this is a picture of what we really want to get, and adjust accordingly. And then lastly, we're going to talk about kind of the more expert way to use call intelligence to optimize your paid search programs. So Allstate, I'm sure everybody in this room has heard of Allstate. They're an insurance company. And they really wanted to understand conversation insights to optimize their bid management in real time. And so if you are a paid search manager for Allstate, you know that you are spending money for certain keywords, and if somebody calls in, it can have a couple different types of outcomes. It could be someone that's calling to request a quote, somebody's calling to make a purchase, or it could be somebody who just got in a fender bender on the side of the road and they just needed to call and talk to their agent right away and they didn't know, don't have their agent's phone number saved, and so they just Googled Allstate Insurance and tried to find it that way. So two very different outcomes. One, the paid search acquisition manager really likes, and one, they don't really like. And so they wanted to be able to understand in real time what was happening on these phone calls and use that to optimize bid spend. But their challenge, and it seems like a challenge that a lot of you guys in this room have, is that they didn't have access to that call center conversion data. It took 45 days from when something actually happened in the call center to when it made its way back to the digital marketing team. And 45 days is a really long time. I mean, I don't need to tell you guys, but it's a very competitive industry, and waiting 45 days to be able to optimize on that information is going to lead to misattribution and misallocated search spend. And so their solution, we partnered with them to utilize AI, and AI is a word that's getting tossed around all the time, but it does have a very valuable impact when it comes to something like trying to understand something as complex as a conversation with all that different information. And so by partnering with Allstate, we'd have the calls come in through the Invoca platform. We would understand in real time what happened on that call. So was it a quote inquiry? Was an application completed? And then in real time, we'd push that information back into their bid management tools so they could adjust it in real time. So they didn't need to wait 45 days to know if this click or this keyword, phone call, everything led to ideal option or less ideal option. We could understand that in real time for real-time optimization. And the results that they saw from that were pretty massive. So immediately they saw an 18% reduction in cost per quote and a 54% reduction in total campaign spend. So that's really powerful numbers. And this is using our Signal AI tool. This is beyond some of the other optimization and call intelligence things that they were doing before. So incrementally, this is a giant improvement that really allowed them to have a really valuable impact. And so we kind of just walked through 3 different flavors of the same type of use case of just how to optimize right out the gate, how to do a little more complex, and how to use AI to do it. But this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what you can do with call intelligence. So you can use all this valuable call and caller data to, for retargeting ads, for email personalization. You could use it to build lookalike audiences in Facebook and Google and all these different tools. Or you could use it to personalize things like call routing. So based off the keyword that somebody searched, if it seems like a very high intent keyword, you could route them directly to an agent who can help them right away rather than making them kind of suffer and sit online or sit on the phone and just possibly drop off before they convert. And so we would love to talk to you guys a little bit more. I'm here with my colleagues, Glenn and Megan. We've got a table just on the other side of the wall, so over the next couple days, if you guys want to talk more about call intelligence, some of the challenges that you guys are facing, and what we can really do to help, we would love to do that. We also have some little Invoca branded sunscreen outside, so if you guys are going to go do some activities out in the sun and want to grab some on your way out, we've got that there for you. But thank you guys very much for your time. Thanks.